and welcome to FranklinCovey's On Leadership series. My name is Scott Miller, and I'm privileged to serve as your ongoing host and interviewer. We're also delighted to announce that this has now become the world's fastest growing leadership newsletter dedicated to the topic of leadership development. If you're not subscribing to it, visit FranklinCovey.com and click on the On Leadership tab, and each week we will push to you complimentary via email on Tuesdays that week's leadership newsletter, which includes three main features: an interview where I have either in the studio live here or on the video a different expert each week, where we interview them for about 35 minutes. It also includes a blog that I write on a highlight of the interview, as well as a downloadable tip or tool from one of the 30-plus solutions in Franklin Covey's All Access Pass. We invite you, your family, your friends, and everybody in your company to subscribe to On Leadership. You also can consume it in a podcast format on any of your favorite podcast channels. So we invite you to be a member of the increasingly large On Leadership community. Now, for today's guest, I'm delighted to invite back to the studio for a second appearance, because he's so fun and insightful, FranklinCovey's Chief People Officer, Todd Davis. Todd, welcome back.
Hey, Scott.
Great to have you here.
Great to be here.
I think you were one of our first interviewees, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
You have just been on the world tour for your new book, Get Better, which became a Wall Street Journal best-selling book, not too shabby.
It was a nice compliment.
And you, in fact, just yesterday, you gave a keynote to a company here in Utah about Get Better.
That's right.
If I'm not mistaken, this world tour took you, I'm going to get this wrong, but you left Utah and went and spoke in London. Milan first, and then London, and then to Edinburgh, Scotland, back to London. You flung yourself across the world over to Nairobi, Kenya, where you gave 3 or 4 keynotes. And then you went to Oman, Muscat, Oman, and then back and spoke in Dubai, and then came and capped it at the World Business Forum in New York City, and then you collapsed, right, after all of that.
You just made me tired walking through that, but it was actually a phenomenal experience.
Was that 17 days?
It was 20 days.
20 days round trip.
Yeah.
Tell me the highlight of the trip.
Wow. Well, many highlights, but I would summarize the highlight in 2 ways. The first is that we are a dot. And when I say we are a dot, I mean you and I here in Salt Lake, or Joyce and Ian in Nairobi, or wherever we are such a dot in this magnificent, huge world that we have. That would just, while I've known that, while we've talked about that, to experience that and realize just what a small piece of the world we all really are was pretty life-changing, just something important to remember. And the other significant highlight was we're pretty much all the same. You know, people, we have certainly different cultures, different ways of doing things, different ways of expressing ourselves, but we all want to matter. We all want to be a part of something that matters. We all want to contribute. Very sincerely, those were the 2 biggest takeaways from this 20 days. You shared a fun story about a keynote in Dubai and kind of what the culture is like in the room. We capped that for our audience. Here I thought I had really done well at studying the different cultures I'd be a part of and how to anticipate them. And at the end of one of the presentations, and there were, I don't know, a couple hundred people in the room, and the guide or the person that was helping me, he said, well, that went well. And I said, how do you know it went well? And he said, because nobody walked out. And I started to laugh thinking he was joking, and he said, oh no. The culture here, if people are bored or not finding it interesting, they just get up and leave. I said, you're serious? He said, I'm very serious. And he said, no one walked out. That's a huge compliment. So
and it isn't an insult. It's just it's a norm. You said culturally people leave and no one thinks twice about it.
That's exactly right.
And I think I also texted you every hour on the hour when you were in Milan. Have you seen The Last Supper? Have you seen The Last Supper? Because it's true, you did get a chance to go see the restored Last Supper painting.
I had a few hours on a Sunday before I flew out and was able to snag a ticket. That was really, really awesome.
Amazing. Yeah. Whenever I've been to Milan, it's always either been on tour or under construction or restoration, and what a highlight.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Great experience.
So Get Better has been received very well. You're still keynoting in between the cracks and crevices of being the Chief People Officer. But today our topic is actually not about the content in the book. It's more about what led you to write the book, which is your experience being the Chief People Officer and really culling on what are probably approaching tens of thousands of high courage conversations, interviews, dismissals, performance appraisals, right? Performance plans, promotion conversations. Not all bad, some are good as well. So today I want to kind of lean in to your expertise and talk about what have you learned from all these different conversations around developing leaders, careers that are successful, careers that have stumbled or such.
Great.
Sound good?
Yes, and I appreciate that setup because as I like to explain to people, I don't go to groups or stand up in front of people as some big genius expert, but like all of us, fortunately or unfortunately, I say it fortunately, for the last 30 years, I've been in a similar role to my current Chief People Officer role, where I've just had rep upon rep upon rep. So just like you and others are experts in their fields, it's because of all of the trial and error and the practice and the reps that they've had. So my thoughts that I'm going to share with you today, and I don't know what you're going to ask me, but I'll hope you go easy on me, are just based on years and years of continuous repetitions of seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work.
And lots of emotional intelligence, and lots of interpersonal self-awareness, and lots of discipline and maturity. So he's super humble, but trust me, the guy has learned it the hard way like many of us. So let's talk about attracting and retaining talent, right? Okay. Unemployment, 3%, historically low for decades right now. And it's hard to get great employees in any organization. What advice would you give to other chief recruiting officers or organizations that are not just trying to attract talent, but retain talent? Because it's kind of a two-sided monster, isn't it?
Yeah,
monster in a good way.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too high-minded here, but it truly boils down to walking your talk. Organizations that are authentic, not perfect, we try to be authentic here, we're far from perfect, but organizations that really focus on modeling the mission statement they have on the wall or the values they have posted, those are the organizations that people want to work for and that people stay at. And so there are certainly the daily things. You got to pay people right, you got to recognize people, treat them fairly, but those organizations that have the integrity to really walk their talk and model, those are the organizations that are getting the top talent and retaining it.
I was in LinkedIn yesterday writing something and looking around, and I forgot someone in my network said, I'm in HR to keep our leaders from being jackasses. Which I kind of like that.
Authentic statement.
That's right. Highlight some of the leadership lessons that you've seen go well in your career, when you're really especially proud of a leader inside the FranklinCovey organization. What is she doing well? What is he doing right?
Yeah, well, again, they're living what they're trying to get others to live. So they're models of the very thing they're trying to get their teams to live. They're authentic in that they're not trying to be the know-it-all, perfect, never make a mistake. They're very real people. And they're not hiding, and it is a tendency we all have. Gosh, we don't want our team to know our flaws or our mistakes. But those leaders who are real with their teams, who admit, hey, I'm on this journey like all of you. I'm in a different role to kind of keep things moving along, keep things organized, but we're all learning together. Those are some great leadership qualities.
So really humility, right?
Humility and just facing reality and being truthful about who you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are.
I've heard you coin a phrase recently where we should be trying to be not the best leader you want to be, but the best leader your people need you to be. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
I kind of wrecked that, I'm sure.
No, you didn't wreck it. But I brought this up, in fact, in the keynote I did yesterday. I asked the folks, do you want to be a great leader, or do you want your teams led by a great leader? And people will say, well, isn't that the same thing, or what's the real difference? And I appreciate them asking that, because it's such a subtle difference, but it makes a world of difference. If I want to be a great leader, that's a noble thing, but in the end, that's about me. I want my brand to be, I want to be known as the one who helped so-and-so succeed, or the one who helped the team turn the corner, or redo the organization to be successful. If I want my team led by a great leader, the focus is on them. We may accomplish very similar things, but it's always with the end in mind of them being led by a great leader. Yeah. So by every morning I'm waking up thinking, what does Scott need? What does Debbie need? What does Cindy need? How can I help them be more successful versus how can I be the great leader? So it's a small differentiator, but it makes a big difference.
Revisit, Todd, the concept of what great leaders do. You talked about sort of having humility and recognizing that they're on a journey, like their team is. What are some other tangible behaviors when you think of people right now in your mind, of some of the greatest leaders at FranklinCovey? Practically, what are they doing that anybody could adopt at the end of this interview?
Yeah. Well, not in this particular order, they listen. They really listen. So they start, yeah, good job.
Like this,
They start a meeting, and while they may have an agenda, they take time to understand where the other person's coming from. And they really listen, they reflect back, just like we teach in 7 Habits. They reflect back. So Scott, what I hear you saying is, and not to go through the mechanics of empathic listening, but to really make sure people feel understood. You know, Stephen Covey said the deepest need of the human heart is to feel understood. I have found that is true over and over and over again. So great leaders really take time to understand the teams that they're leading, something that they do. They, as I said earlier, they're not trying to hide what they don't know. In fact, they frequently say, Scott, I'm not quite sure how to do this. What ideas do you have? What do you think we ought to do? That is something a great leader says. Other things that great leaders...
Can I stop there?
You bet.
Because on that last one, I've had people tell me that frustrates them. That sometimes they feel techniqued by that. I've seen it happen even, where they'll say, no, I want you to tell me what I need to do. You're my boss, you're my leader. On this one, I don't really want to explore it anymore. I'm kind of bankrupt on ideas. I need you to help me fix it. There's a fine line between that being a technique versus...
Well, no, I hear what you're saying, and you've got this continuum here, and here you can micromanage everything. We're going to do it my way. Here's how you're going to do it. Pick up this, write that, don't write this. And here, you're
everything
on your own.
Rhetorical,
yeah, you're
right,
totally abandoned. No, I'll check in with you once a year. We don't want to be at either extreme. But I would say if you're right in the middle, err to the side. Don't micromanage, but let them know, people know, gosh, I'm not quite sure what to do. I mean, here's some ideas I have, but I'm open to any ideas, and really mean it. I think when it feels technique-y is when it is a technique, when we're not sincere in what our end in mind is.
Right.
If my end in mind is to really help my team develop, then it doesn't matter the words I use. It's not going to feel technique-y because my intent's going to come through.
When you think about leaders that are wrecking it, I'm guessing it's generally accidental. No one tries to destroy someone's self-esteem or steamroll over someone. What are some of the mistakes that leaders fall into that cause some of the biggest problems?
Well, thinking about, again, I've had...
Not in politics. I mean just actually in an organizational environment.
You said we only have 35 minutes, right? I've had a lot of great leaders, and no perfect leader, nor do I think there is a perfect leader. But those that have really struggled, that I've either had myself or seen, and it's usually unintentional, they make it about them. Going back to what we said a minute ago, it's about, well, I want to climb the career ladder. I need to make sure that this project's successful because I need that, blue ribbon, or I need that accolade. And so they focus more on the recognition that they're going to get than developing others. That's a big mistake. Micromanaging, which I don't think people do on purpose, but I think we get so intent on making sure that the project succeeds that we can't help ourselves, and we get down into doing it thinking we know best, and so we kind of micromanage every piece of it. Those are some big mistakes that I see leaders make.
What advice would you give on delivering bad news to employees?
Yeah.
Role play it with me.
It's a great question. Well, before we role play, are you familiar with where the term cut to the chase comes from?
No.
I wasn't either till a few years ago. In the movie industry, back, I guess most movies, maybe it's still true today, many movies have a chase scene. There's a car chase scene or some chase. And so when the producers and the directors were doing final edits to the film, if they were thinking the film dragged on too much or got too long, they would say, cut to the chase. Let's cut to the chase, meaning literally cut to the chase.
Scene,
yeah, that's where the term came from. I remember that because when people are coming in for bad news, or when you have bad news to deliver as a leader, if we're going to be restructuring, or I'm going to talk to you about a disciplinary performance plan we're going to put you on, or we're going to be terminating you, they already know when they come in, something's not right, cut to the chase. Now, some people say, well, isn't that callous? No, what's more callous is to try and have some long, dragged-out, ice-breaking, hey, how's your mom
trying to figure out and understand.
Where'd you get your shirt and all this? And they're going, come on, what's going on here? So I don't say they walk in and you say, hey, Scott, you're fired, or Scott, we're putting you on a performance plan. But what I say, now back to your role play, Scott comes in to say, hey, Scott, I appreciate you coming in. This is going to be a difficult conversation, but I want you to know my only intent is for us together to figure out how we get back on the right course. Okay, I cut to the chase there. I let them know right up front. This is going to be difficult. And then as Stephen talks about in Trust, as I talk about in Get Better, declare your intent. And be sincere about it. And then it's not manipulative or techniquey. My only intent is for us to come to a resolution that feels like the right thing to do for you, for the company, for the team. So let me just dive right in.
Yeah.
And that's how I begin most difficult conversations.
Is the cut to the chase principle the same when you're terminating somebody, when you literally are ending their job?
It is. It is. Again, with empathy, but when they come in...
Would you demonstrate it for us?
It would
I
be,
mean,
sure,
surely.
because
fire me.
It would,
Please, please.
Well, we've had a lot of practice at this, haven't we?
A little, sorry. Still
No,
here.
because in the end, there's no way, nor should you be hiding what this is going to be about. They already sense something's wrong. So you're just prolonging the misery.
Would you mind just on the cuff? I know you haven't prepared for this.
That's fine.
Terminate me.
Yeah, Scott, I appreciate you making time to come in today. This is a very difficult conversation. You and I have had several conversations about the performance challenges on your team over the last couple of months. And I appreciate the efforts you've made to work through some of those and see if you couldn't improve the situation. And I know you've been giving it a lot of effort and attention. In the end, this isn't working. It's not working now, and we have made the decision that it's not going to work long term. So we are making the decision to end the employment relationship with you. I know that's tough to hear. I want to pause for just a minute because that's big 2x4 across the head. So let's just take a minute. I've got some other information I want to share with you, but I want to pause and see if there's anything you want to say right now, or are you okay with me to go on?
You son of a... No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, well, be ready for that.
But it felt humane. It felt fairly cut to the chase, and I'm not unclear.
Well, and of course, it should never be a surprise. I mean, if you're terminating someone and this is the first they've heard about
shame on the leader, right?
Shame on the leader,
right.
Shame on the organization that allows that to happen.
That's a great insight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If anybody is surprised that they're fired, that's more the leader's responsibility as much as it is the person that's being terminated.
Yeah, the only time I can think of in my lengthy career that it would be a surprise is if we're having a major restructuring, and this isn't about performance. This is about, we are closing down this part of the business.
Or someone did something that was so unconscionable that had a history of that where there was no negotiation.
Which then wouldn't be a surprise either, because they know that they stole or did whatever they shouldn't have done.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you for that. That was helpful. I think it's helpful for people to see it modeled as well, too.
And by the way, can you meet me today at 2:30?
No.
Okay.
Excuse me. I'm recovering from a cold. Talk about recruiting talent. What types of characteristics do you look for when you're interviewing people?
Yeah, great question. So certainly the specifics of whatever the role is, the competency. If we have a need for someone in our creative services department, they got to have graphic design experience,
right? Technical skills.
Yeah, all of the technical skills. But on the character side and the non-technical skills, number one, it's their flexibility and adaptability, and that has risen more and more to the top. I think about our superstar performers here. And while they have all the technical aspects of their job down and they have great character, those that really rise to the top are some of the most adaptable and flexible people. Not wishy-washy, but as you and I both know, things change on a daily basis. The best laid plans never go out how they're supposed to. And people, I've worked with some, and you've worked with some really talented people who just struggle with adapting to those things.
How do you screen for that? How do you uncover that?
Well, something that's been around for years, and I still swear by it, is just what's called behavioral interviewing. Talking through experiences they've had in the past. It's some people in interviews view it as a goal to put people on the spot, to try and surprise them with a question. While that may be helpful in some industries or for some specific types of jobs, I find that the most useful type of interview is just what we're doing here. Have a conversation. Honestly, what we both want to know is what is it going to be like to have Scott Miller working for our organization 6 months from now? And what Scott wants to know is, what is it going to be like working for FranklinCovey 6 months ago? And I say to the candidate, if we could wave a wand right now and fast forward 6 months, let's have that be the metaphor for this conversation. I try and put them as much ease as they can so that I can really get an insight into what they're going to be like when they're not interviewing, but when they're actually here performing the job.
Because no one wants to dupe each other. They want to work in a firm where they love the culture, and you want someone who you know who they really are.
That's exactly right. And so specifically to your question, how do you screen for people who are flexible? So once we've got the conversation style going, I say, so tell me what it was like to work for such and such a place. Did you ever run into a situation where this happened? How did you handle it? What did you do here? And as they start talking and not interviewing, but just sharing, you get a real sense for how they handle different situations and what they do.
Any interviewing tips you might share with other people out here that are in the process of interviewing and they struggle with how to create a great interview. What are some top?
For the candidates?
No, for the actual interviewer.
Okay.
Interview tips. We'll get to that. But
Yeah.
first, interviewer tips.
Yeah. Well, what we just said, make it, and again, I know that there are some specific roles that maybe you do want to see how, if I were interviewing somebody to work in a triage room and I want to see how they handle pressure, maybe I would have some surprise questions, but usually you just want to get them relaxed and conversing so that you can find out who they really are, what they're really like. So that would be the first thing. A question that I always ask, and I've tried to figure out how to shorten it, and I haven't yet, but I will say, Scott, tell me about a time when someone gave you some advice, your boss, a peer, a colleague, and you didn't agree with it. You were, in fact, kind of insulted by it. You thought, wow, I don't do that, or I don't, the thing that they accused you of doing, but you decided to try it anyway. You decided to take their advice, and it actually worked for you. You became a better whatever you were before that. Now, I've tried to shorten that, but it's been a very helpful question for me to get insight into how coachable someone is, how adaptable someone is, how humble someone is, not for humbleness sake, but so that they can learn and grow and develop. And I'll have people who will say, oh, well, where do you want me to start? And they'll give me some really great stories of how they talked too much in their first sales role, or how they did this, and it tells me how coachable they are. I'll have other people who will say, gosh, I'm going to have to think about that for a while. And they really struggle to come up with one. And it's not always black and white, but that person's going to be hard to
speaks to their self-awareness.
That's exactly right. It is. Their self-awareness is the key.
Are you finding that, not the power, but the dynamic is more balanced as of late, where the interviewee is as much control of the conversation as the interviewer is, because they're interested in the culture? They really want to know, do I want to work here?
Well, that's a great question. I learn much more from candidates by the questions they ask than by the answers they give me to my questions. So to your point, if they've done their research, now we interview for a lot of sales roles, so this isn't applicable to all roles, but if they've done their research on our company, they're telling me, well, tell me about last quarter, what happened there, or tell me about, I noticed that your CFO does this or whatever. I think, wow, this is the kind of research they're going to be doing on the clients they call on. We love that. Whereas people who I've interviewed who it's obvious know very little about the company, it shows me the lack of preparation that they do for something that's important. So yes, to your point, the questions that they ask show the level of engagement and level of interest they have in their job and what they're doing.
You've conducted a lot of interviews, thousands over the course, some video, some phone, a lot in person. What do the best interviewees do that you would say aren't manipulative? But what does the best interview look like? If someone wanted to take away some notes right now.
As a candidate.
As a candidate.
Yes. Well, the basics that we've known for years, that they're there on time, if they're dressed appropriately, they're professional, they come from a frame of reference of what can I do for the company, not what can the company do for me. It's interesting. I don't interview, we have a whole recruiting department, but I'll interview senior positions and finalist candidates. And when they're coming from the perspective of, how they want to help the company, not, well, what kind of benefits do you have, and what can I expect, as far as promotions and that. Now, of course, you want to know those things, but don't ask those in an interview. There are other ways to find that out. Come with your experience, and I was reading last year how you took on this new initiative. I wanted to share with you what I did at this other company, and I thought it might be, from a humble perspective, but I thought it might be beneficial because I have such and such experience. So everything through the lens of here's what I could do for the company in a humble way, not an arrogant way.
What's the best way to get promoted? Recognizing that every company has different processes and ladders and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Generally speaking,
knock it out of the park,
that.
whatever role you're in, knock it out of the park, and find additional things you can do that aren't part of that job description. Whether you're the receptionist, and you are the best receptionist this company's ever had, and you noticed a need that wasn't part of your job, but you took it on and started doing it, or whether you are a senior VP in the company, knock it out of the park. We'll have great people, good people here at FranklinCovey who really want to go do something different, but they're really struggling at their current job. And that's natural. I understand that. Gosh, I want to get out of this. But they're going to struggle with being promoted. Kick it. Do a great job of the role you're in, and then you'll have opportunity after opportunity open up.
Todd, you've given probably 50, 60 keynotes just in the last 12 months or so, all around the nation, around the world. Half of which are probably for conferences and events, and half are like inside company cultures. Think of some of the companies you've been in. You loved their culture in the 3 or 4 hours you were there. What was happening unique to those companies that made you say, gosh, I like this place. I'd work here?
Yeah. What a great question. One that comes to mind is it's very large, I won't mention the name of it, but a very world-renowned company. The leadership team was sitting on the front row. The CEO, the CFO, the VP, or the Chief Operations Officer, they were all sitting on the front row. I was surprised they were there for what I was told this event was going to be. They were right there, and boy, were they engaged and paying attention. I'm not saying that from a self-serving standpoint. I'm saying that they were modeling for this very large company how important investing in their people were with training. And something interesting that happened at this event, I was at the keynote time, I think it was an hour and 15 minutes they had told me to give, and I had one more practice I wanted to share that took about 5 minutes. CEO, it's a woman, she was sitting on the front row, and I said, okay, we're gonna go just a little bit over and just take 5 minutes to talk about this last practice. And she looked at me and she said, like this. And I said, actually, we're not. And I made a joke. I said, because your CEO did this, and I think that means we're not going to go over by 5 minutes. And we had a fun way to conclude the keynote. And then afterwards, she very respectfully but very directly came up to me and she said, one of our company values is we value everyone's time. And how we model that is when we schedule a meeting from 2 to 3, we start the meeting on time and we end the meeting on time. And she said, we've done that for the last 5 years, and it's really had a positive impact on our culture. And I thought, what a magnificent lesson. So that was
as modeled from the top.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Todd, let's take some time on Get Better. Let's revisit the book. So talk about the premise of Get Better. We know why you wrote it now because of all these lessons and such, but what's the book about, and what have clients most resonate who write to you all the time and post and blog? What are the biggest lessons you think people are taking from the book as people talk to you about it?
Well, I think all of us, especially in the business world, would agree that more and more is required of us all the time. We have this mounting pressure. I think you probably feel more is required of you today than was required of you last year.
No, because you fired me about 6 minutes ago.
Yeah,
so.
okay. Yeah, and we're all measured in a lot of different ways because we're in different roles, we're at different stages in our careers.
Sure.
But the ultimate measure for every one of us is by the results we get. And when you think about how we all get our results, unless you're a pro golfer, we get our results with and through others. And so relationships are more than just a nice thing to have. They are foundational to achieving every one of the important goals we're trying to achieve and getting the results we want to get. And so that's the focus on this. We get results with and through others. And so the most important competency I profess is our ability to influence. And we do that by looking in the mirror and starting with ourselves. The most authentic, the most effective leaders and people who are not in leadership positions, competency that they can have is their ability to influence. And so the Get Better book was written around these 15 practices of Scott Miller, Todd Davis, looking in the mirror and saying, where can I get better? Do I wear glasses that work? Am I seeing the world as it really is or how I've convinced myself as it is? Do I allow outside people and influences to determine the course of my day? Or do I, as practice 2 suggests, do I carry my own weather? Do I say, gosh, I don't care what Scott says. I can control my reaction to that. I can decide how I'm going to respond.
I think through the book's sales and the number of keynotes that are coming your way from CEOs proves that, like never before, the C-level suite is valuing the role that relationships plays to culture. Because there's not a CEO in the world that doesn't understand now the value of culture.
Well, and you asked a few minutes ago about how to attract and retain people. And those CEOs and those leadership teams who are focusing on making sure people feel valued, feel engaged, that they have the relationships at work that make them want to come to work. That's how you attract and retain.
I feel like, in my experience, and the occasions that I speak around the nation as well too, although you speak a lot more than I do, is that for some time ago, culture was a buzzword that CEOs had to talk about. And now it's not that. Now it is like central and crucial to their own, not just mantra, but they feel responsible because they know the direct relationship that culture plays on not just attracting, but retaining talent.
Right. Well, and people have so many options. There are so many options that you better be focused on it if you're going to keep that talent that was so hard to get in the first place.
Hey, in our final moment, so what's next for you? I hear you're writing a new book.
Well, I hear you are too. Wouldn't that be funny if we were writing the same book? Yes, I'm privileged, and I mean that sincerely, to be co-authoring a book with you and Victoria Russo, our other colleague, and super excited about Everyone Deserves a Great Manager.
That's right, kind of a shameless pitch. But so we are co-writing a book together. I'm kind of on your coattails right now, in Victoria's, but the new book is called Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. The 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team by Simon Schuster, coming out in October of 2019. Tell us a bit about the concept of the book. So the 6 Critical Practices is actually an offering we have.
That's right. And it's whether you're a new manager, being a new manager can be daunting.
Right.
I work with new managers all the time. And some of us who have managed for a long time.
Being a seasoned manager can be daunting, trust me.
More daunting. And we kind of forget the things that have come second nature to us. I was with a manager the other day who said, okay, well, I've got to talk to, her name was Crystal. I've got to talk to, I can use her name now because we fired her. No, I'm kidding. But I got to talk to Crystal about this performance problem. And he said to me, great guy. He said, how do I begin the conversation? I mean, and I thought, wow, you're right. When I first had my first leadership role, I didn't even know how to start that conversation. Right. And so certainly it's about that, but very seasoned leaders will get a lot out of this book as well, because there are things that we may have known to do but haven't been doing for a long time. Or neglected and such. That's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
What I love about the book that we're co-writing is that we're co-writing it. Is that it's got great real stories. It's a book written primarily at the first level leader, but it's applicable to every leadership role, but it's real, it's kind of raw, it's identifiable, and it's immediately applicable, right? There's great tools. We're going to tape dozens of videos with you, role-playing, effective one-on-one meetings, ineffective one-on-one meetings, how to give feedback, how to have performance appraisals. So you're going to be a star on a lot of videos with this book too. So
well, we're working on a section right now where, just to your point, everybody's different. We got to remember that everybody's different. And the feedback section we're working on is where you sit down to give some tough feedback to someone. It's not cookie cutter. It's not the same. You got this person receives feedback really well.
Like a family.
This person is going to get emotional before I even get the word out. This person is my superstar. Does everything perfect, and so they'll be shocked that they're not doing something perfect. So you got to adapt, and there's a whole section on that.
So stay tuned, October 15th, 2019. Everyone Deserves a Great Manager, the 6 Critical Practices for Leading a Team by Todd Davis, Victoria, and Scott Miller. So Todd, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll have you back when the book comes out.
Okay.
And we'll see you back next week for On Leadership. Thanks for joining us.